Welcome to UO Today. I'm Paul Peppis, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. My guest today is UO English major Alex Dang, a two-time competitor at the National Poetry Slam and will be again this year for the third time, and the youngest representative from Portland in the Slam's history. Videos of his performances have amassed over 1.5 million views on YouTube. Dang has been a speaker at two TEDx events, TEDx Reno and TEDx U Oregon. A nationally touring poet, he has performed in over 35 cities. Co-founder of the UO English Poetry Slam team, Dang was the Eugene Poetry Grand Slam champion in 2014 and 15. His chapbook, You Can Do Better, which I've got right here, was published in 2014. Thank you, Alex, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So first, what is slam poetry?
Slam poetry is a really general term, and we poets kind of understand this. Slam poetry is to spoken word as hip hop is to rap. Hip hop is the culture, and rap is the actual act of it. So the slam poetry is the culture that surrounds spoken word, and essentially it is a performance-based competition event in which poets from around the country will go on stage and share and compare their art at a random numerical value assigned by 5 random judges in the audience.
So you say compare. You didn't use the word compete. They're competitions, aren't they?
They are definitely competitions, but there's a lot of sayings in slam poetry. One of the most famous being the point is not the points, the point is the poetry. So more often or not, it's more of just a convention of poetry, seeing all the different types of slam poetry, different types of performances coming together, and they just happen to assign numerical values, even though those aren't always necessarily correct.
One of your poems, called Super Gonzo, is about your great mentor who was crucial in helping you find your voice. Tell us about Super Gonzo and what you learned from him.
So Super Gonzo was the performance piece I did for TEDx Reno, and their theme was the biggest little citizen. And I was still trying to work it out and try to figure out what I really wanted to talk about, whether or not I wanted to go big or go small. But then I figured that the biggest little citizen to me was my senior English teacher and my speech and debate coach, Patrick Gonzalez, and as we lovingly call him Gonzo. And this was a poem dedicated to him and the fact that he was there since my sophomore year. He got me into speech and debate. He taught me how to perform. He taught me how to really engage with the audience, and he gave me a new love for language that was already there, but he definitely pushed me and cultivated it and helped me really accept that this was what I like to do and that I should keep doing it.
So he's given you this confidence, he's helped you find your voice, you say. How did you come to do your first performance as a slam poet?
So I'd always been someone who liked the stage. I'm the youngest child, so I've always kind of liked being in the limelight. And in middle school, I started pursuing becoming a hip hop artist. So I did a lot of open mics, a lot of performances and competitions within the local Portland hip hop scene. And in high school, I started doing theater, and I also started doing speech and debate. So I had a lot of performance background already. And I remember when I was 17, between the summer of my junior and senior year, I wanted to go to an open mic to practice out one of my songs a cappella. And it just happened to be the Portland Poetry Slam that I stumbled into. And I stuck around for the competition portion, and I saw this beautiful, beautiful art form which combined writing, performance, stage, this direct audience connection that you have like in speech and debate, but it was also, it was basically all the things that I liked doing up until then, all kind of neatly packed up in one nice little package. So I stuck around for 4 years, and here I am today.
You've given a sense, I think, general sense of the things about the genre, about the mode that appeal to you. Say a little bit more about the kinds of topics that slam poets engage, and in particular, what are the kinds of topics that you tend to write about in your poetry?
Slam poetry, like I think all good art and literature and poetry, really addresses the issues that are close to the poet's heart. We can look at a lot of historical examples of poetry in which it is very revolutionary. It is talking about dissent. It's talking about their unhappiness with the government or with kings, and insert X here. And I think a lot of that still shows in slam poetry. And we see a lot of these viral poems going viral for a reason, because they are hitting close to race issues or systematic oppression or the things that really matter to the poet. I always say that poetry doesn't care about who you are, it just cares about the story that you have to tell. I think good poetry tells me why you care about something and makes me want to care about it. And the best thing about slam poetry, I feel like, is that every community, their form of slam is always indicative to that community. You'll see poets in the South that are very, very performance-based because they have such a heavy hip-hop culture there. And I remember when I was in Baton Rouge, like, they always used food metaphors, which I absolutely loved. And Minnesota has a very specific way of doing poetry. They use all these disconjoined metaphors and they bring it all together with this one unifying metaphor that ties it all in together. The style in the Northeast is very slow and deliberate, and they gaze lasers into your head, and sometimes it's just all over the place. And I feel like every poet from a specific area kind of brings in what they know and what their problems are with their community and what their blessings are with that community. So every poem is kind of like a little meter of like what that neighborhood is all about.
You identify as a Portland poet, so what's the Portland style?
We are lovingly known in the national poetry circuit as Northworst because within the Northwest, we always create the poetry that is the poet's favorite poetry, but not necessarily heavy in performance or in like that kind of really, really loud, direct kind of conflict style with the judge where it's like, yeah, this is why this is important. We very much value writing in the Northwest. We really much value the poetics and the subtleties and kind of more introspective narratives, which isn't to say that we are doing a lot better in national competitions. So we are starting to toe the line in which the things that we want to perform, the things that we feel like are important to say, are the things that also are doing well in slam. And I think the culture of slam is shifting towards a less performance-y, a less loud fireworks style into something that the audience can actually listen to and appreciate, but then also appreciate the performance. It's very, very, very delicate balance between writing for the stage and writing on the page.
Given that that's the point you've just made, you're going to share with us two poems. One is a page poem that you're going to share with us, and then you're going to perform a poem. Tell us about the first poem, the page poem.
The page poem, it's an open letter from Frankenstein's monster to Victor Frankenstein. And this poem, I feel like it has a lot of different themes in it, and it's something that I do like performing because I like this poem a lot and I want people to hear it. But it's something I wrote specifically because I knew the reader would sit with it. I knew that it would exist in their hands and that they can like leaf over it and read it over and over and over again. While the other poem, a lot of the other slam poems, when you go into a slam performance, you have 3 minutes to read a poem to an audience that knows nothing about you. It's a very, very strange first date. But you have 3 minutes to do a poem in which they don't have the text right there in front of them, and they have one impression, and you have one shot. So obviously you have to make it a little more memorable within either performance or make the writing a lot more digestible and clear and concise versus a page poem where you can delve into the poetics. You can use caesuras and breaks and the actual format of the page. There are different advantages to both, and none is better than the other. They're two heads of the same beast, I think.
So do you need to see it, or you don't need to see it?
I need to see the Frankenstein
Okay,
poem,
good.
yeah.
So the title of the poem is An Open Letter from Frankenstein's Monster to Victor Frankenstein, and I will get it for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
An open letter from Frankenstein's monster to Victor Frankenstein. You never named me. Victor, you never gave me what little humanity every person is owed. I understand that there are abominations and monstrosities which should be forgotten, erased from history, but even hurricanes have names. What you did gift me was a strange set of genes, this body of parts and pieces, a patchwork quilt made from the stuff of nightmares. Why did you create me? Was it for your own ego? You wanted to give the world a new species of good, obedient dogs. Now, hear me bark, hear me snarl. You were the first person I saw in this dread existence, and my own creator, my own inventor, my own father fled at the sight of my being. I can speak, I can reason. Victor, Father, why can't you listen to me? God made man in his image. Did you do the same? Is that why you cannot hear me? Can you not bear the mirror staring back at you in fractured and stitched glory? Are my prayers too broken to piece together? Where do you place my devotions? Are you just too busy reading your own hubris to be concerned with my humble back-breaking for your egotism? Victor, I have tried so hard to be a son you can be proud of, and you have abandoned me. I am the chastised boy in the hands of a vengeful father. My only fallible step was that I was born wrong. Why don't you kill me then? Strike me down, breathe me reverse life. If you gave it to me, take it away, because I can feel. I have wept, I have read poetry, and felt the loneliness when the streets clear out when they see my monstrous face. You never named me, Victor. But when they say Frankenstein, they will always see me. They will see my mismatched wretch of a husk. They will see my skin taut awkward over the skeleton frame you gave me. They hear Frankenstein, and they will always see my yellow, watery eyes. They think you named me after yourself. They don't realize that without me, your name means nothing. That without me, the word Frankenstein is empty. I have set myself on fire, and the world has seen my blaze. I hope you're proud of me, Dad.
So the second poem you're going to perform for us, what's that one called?
That one is called it's called My Mom's Favorite Flowers Are Yellow Roses. Everyone I love has a superpower, and they will tell you that their origin story did not make them who they are. The people I look up to did not tell me that their Uncle Ben, destruction of Krypton, Night at the Opera is what made them strong. The people I look up to did not tell me that their drug addiction, alcoholism, grief is what made them strong. The ability to become after the world sledgehammers you is what makes them great. My mom does not tell me her story is what made her super. Let me explain. I was born and bore witness to her immense strength. As far as superheroes goes, she is by far the most overpowered. With a frame of 4 foot 10 inches, my mother, Naktu Tran, redefines comic book badassery. Super strength. With one hand, she has carried 4 sons and tossed their sorry selves through college, and with the other, made my father a mountain of a man, a pebble smooth into the shape of her palm. Intelligence. Such gems like do it right once or do it wrong 3 times. Don't be sorry, just don't do it again. And of course, the world's favorite, of course I know everything. I'm your mom. Telepathy. All the times I thought I was being sneaky as shit, but she was just letting me get away with it. Clairvoyance. She can see ghosts too. She still sees her father like when she was 7, still hanging in the kitchen after he found out the communists were going to take him away. Still drifting in her mind back and forth, a pendulum ticking away her innocence. She hears ghosts too. She still hears the cries of my sister, still feels her small form all star glow, all bundle of light gone as soon as she's shown in our world. Resilience. All she could do was watch her mother's wedding ring spirit away into the pocket of the captain who is taking all the boat people out of the only home that they have ever known. Watch countries deny refugees of humanity, of existence, of safety. Watch days crawl in a re-education camp where she learn nothing but adversity, immortality. She should have died, become a statistic about Vietnamese immigrants who did not make it, a Viet Cong prisoner, and another shouting point for American protesters to end a war she called childhood. And yet she still stands as a lesson to prove how incredible we can be. She has never let her tragedy trump her triumph, never accepted that this was all there was, never waited for a miracle to grant the miracle that I call mom, only stitched up my cape and told me that I could fly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're an English major?
Yes.
The first poem that you read alludes to a canonical literary text. The poem you just performed, that's more like what you typically do.
Yeah.
I know that one of the things that interests you is the question of slam poetry's place. Does slam poetry have a place in the academy? Does slam poetry have a place in the academy?
I think so. I think most definitely so. There is, I feel like whenever you love something enough, you obviously will study everything that's connected to it and that's related to it. And I think slam poetry I think literature has always been something I've really enjoyed. And having all this background knowledge and going into slam poetry, I can see the really subtle things that poets are doing with their literature. Even though it's very performance heavy, even though it's very directly for the audience, for a random select people to enjoy and to understand on the first go, it's still so racked with dense writing and really beautiful writing. There's great persona pieces. There are really great poems that have very, very distinct and drastic turns that you would never expect to see, just like in literature. You see these dramatic turns, you see the climaxes, you see all the really subtle things they're doing with wordplay, with metaphor, with simile, all these really wonderful things that performance kind of brings to life. I feel like the performance acts as a catalyst so you can understand quickly, like, oh, so that's what metaphor really, really is supposed to look like. Or, oh, I get it now because this was a allusion to something in the end. Or, oh, this is a callback. There's things that I should be paying attention when I first start reading. There's a reason why the author put that in the beginning of the book because they allude to it later, because it keeps coming up. You learn about symbolism and motif, and I think slam poetry makes people understand that in a really easy way because it's designed for a random audience. It's designed to be performed, and obviously it's entertainment, so you get that, you get the spinach in the sweet smoothie, I guess.
I know that you're quite knowledgeable about the history of slam. Mm-hmm. Who are some of the important slam poets in that history, but in particular that have influenced you? It's people that our viewers should say, oh, they should go now, track them down.
The story goes, at every poetry slam, there's a little spiel, and the spiel goes, in 1980s, the construction worker named Mark Smith invented slam poetry, and we all yell, so what? He actually started that because he honestly does not care about himself. He cares about the poetry. He cares that it was brought back to a stage to be directed towards the audience. So he was the person who kind of brought slam poetry together as a culture, as a competition, made this very fun bar game that has kind of expanded across the country. And as far as poets that have really broken way, I think the big three that a lot of poets, when they start out, don't realize that they're imitating, but actually are Andrea Gibson, Buddy Wakefield, and Anis Mojgani, who is actually just here at the U of O campus. And they started around the 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. This is when slam poetry really started to take off. But like, there's a lot of great poets even in that 90s era, like Patricia Smith, who's like wonderful, wonderful. And these are all old guard poetry, which a lot of people associate slam poetry with the old guard because it has that really rhythmic cadence. It has that kind of like lilty flow. And within the last few years, I feel like it is changing so much that there's a lot more diversity in slam poetry. The people that have really influenced me are obviously the people I slam against every week at the Portland Poetry Slam. Aaron Bradley taught me how to be like a very loud person on stage. He told me if I'm not tired after a poem, then I'm doing it wrong. Doc Lubin has been a mentor, and he's been on my last two teams. Brenda Toohey, Aaron Schick. There's a lot of people in the Portland scene that are amazing. And right now, the poet that I'm really, really into is a poet named Hanif Willis Abdurraqib. And he, I feel like, embodies the best of both paged poetry and stage poetry. It's incredible how he does it. It makes me mad how well he does it. But it really does depend on where you come from, because I could have looked at a way different poet when I first started slam poetry. My style would probably be way, way different. Had I looked at a Rachel McKibbins, who is a Northeast poet, and she gazes laser beams into your head. Like she fills the entire room with her aura, and she has a very slow and deliberate style. If I had watched that instead of maybe Rudy Francisco, who's one of my first poet inspirations, who's very conversational, very good at performing. The way he performs, he looks at the entire audience, and yet you always think he's looking at you. He's that good of a performer. And had I not seen him when I first started performing, my style might be completely different.
You mentioned before that when you were coming to this calling, you were performing hip hop. You were one of the poems, "I Will Always Love Her," celebrates and defends hip hop music. Tell us about the relationship between slam and hip hop.
I think that there's definitely a strong tie because obviously lyrics that are meant to be performed and poetry that's meant to be performed, they will always have kind of a connection to each other. And a lot of people, like me included, when they first start, they think that they are kind of constricted to the rhyme. So with that constriction to the rhyme and you thinking that you must rhyme, it will kind of sound like hip hop a lot of the times. And I think that's the one kind of more recent relationship. But if you go back far enough, obviously slam poetry is a culture that is rooted in black culture, and hip hop is a culture that's rooted in black culture. So you always get these roots that are tied very distinctly to another culture that I am not entirely part of, which then has a very interesting connotation, and there's an interesting conversation to be had of like this line of respectability versus an appropriation of a culture that's not yours. I think that slam has kind of grown to be so wide and diverse that it can incorporate a lot of different things, and I also think hip hop has done the same thing, but it's very, very prevalent, and it's very, very good to realize that this is an art form that was very much rooted in a black culture that is not necessarily ours, and that it has evolved definitely, but you must pay respects to what it was, and you can never, nothing exists in a vacuum. You can't ever just separate those two.
Say a little bit about this problem about legitimacy. I know in the poem, I Will Always Love Her, you defend rap, hip hop. Seems crazy that that has to be defended in this day and age, but it clearly still has to be defended. Do you feel the same thing about slam, that slam hasn't gotten the respect that it deserves?
A little bit. I feel like there's always, not to be too cliche, but there will always be the haters. And you read all these think pieces from older generations bashing on the millennials, on the me generation, which is fine, sometimes it has valid, sometimes it has merit, but a lot of the times it's because people just like bashing things that people like. Sometimes people are just inherently like, I don't want you to have a good time. And I think hip hop is such a popular culture. It's because it's so ingrained into everything that we do that it is very much just like, well, it's fun and it's cool and ironic to hate the thing that people likes. And as far as slam poetry, I actually just read an article on poetics and sound by Orson Welles, which was assigned to me in class by Andrew McEwen. And in the essay, he talks about how a lot of people, when they think poetry, they think bad poetry. Mm-hmm. And like the common man, when they think poetry, they think of the bad poetry that people who do write poetry also consider bad poetry. But the people who think about that think that that's poetry altogether. So I think it's kind of the same. I think it's always going to be the same with every kind of culture. When you think of something you don't like, obviously you're going to think of like the worst part. If you think about country and you don't like country, you're going to think about the worst kind of country. And yet there's a lot of really great musical artists. There's always going to be something you like, I feel. But I'm also a very optimistic person. I always feel like there is just that right musical artist, that right poem, that right thing to read, then you start liking it.
So you're this touring slam poet, and you're a junior English major at the University of Oregon. So how do you manage performing across the country and being a college student? How do you do that?
I manage it. I try my best. It's something I always think as I'm like taking like long drives. I always think like, thank goodness I'm young, because I don't think it's going to be a lot more difficult when I do this later. But it's something. Junot Diaz has this great quote about stories where he says, "Mine ain't the scariest, the most clearest, or the most beautiful. It's just the one that has its fingers wrapped around my throat." And I feel like slam poetry is just the thing that's like currently wrapped around my throat. I just have to take care of it, otherwise it's gonna bug me down halfway down the line anyways. As far as balancing the both, I will always just try to, I will let my professors know. I will always be aware that I am gonna miss time out, so I will like try to plan other things. And sometimes you combine the both. And when I went on the national tour from January through March, a very nice professor who I really like, named Professor Pepis, was my observer for my independent study and was able to let me do this tour as an academic purpose. So one, I could not lose my financial aid, which was great, but also so I could bring it back to the university and kind of defend it for academia, which was immensely helpful and a real load off my mind.
Yeah, those English professors, they're special people.
Yes, indeed.
You mentioned, now is when it's got its grip on me. A couple of weeks ago, Phil Kay came, a celebrated slam poet, came and performed at the U of O. And he's made a career of this, and he also is an educator.
Yes.
And I know from talking to you that you're interested in education, that Super Gonzo isn't just somebody who helped you, he's also kind of a model for you.
Yeah.
So what do you think is going to, I mean, in 15 years from now, what's Alex Dang going to be doing?
Hopefully still poetry. I would love to continue poetry, but I would also love to, the original plan before poetry got its hands around me, while it was still just kind of holding my hand, I guess, when we were still kind of on a third date basis. I wanted to go back to my old high school and be an English teacher next to Gonzo. I wanted to be peers with him, and I wanted to teach back at my old high school. So maybe down the line I would be teaching at my old high school again. If not, I would still love to become a teacher, and also teachers get those summers off, so I could still tour during the summer.
They don't get their summers off.
Well,
we work all summer.
I can plan the curriculum on the road, I guess.
Are you going to try to integrate your experiences as a slam poet more thoroughly into your academic work? Are you going to like write a thesis on slam poetry? Have you thought about doing that?
I definitely have. It's something I know a lot about, and it's something that I feel like should be said. And I've always been the type of person who thought, well, if no one else is doing it, I might as well do it. And currently, I don't think anyone has spoken about slam poetry at this campus yet. So I would love to take that opportunity to be one of the pioneers, and if not, help others be able to do some research on it. There's a lot of great slam poets that are doing the same thing at their universities, at their neck of the woods. So I would be really honored to be among those poets as well.
So we just have about a minute left. What's next on your agenda as a poet? What are you doing next? What's the next thing?
Well, I am working on my second chapbook, so that's going to be available through Where Are You Press, which is the press that I am signed to, which is also based in Portland, Oregon. I have nationals at the end of the summer, and this summer I'm taking a lot of time to really focus on my writing skills and to, I call it the summer of submissions. I want to come out of this summer with at least 50 rejection letters.
Okay, an awesome ambition. Alex, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and perform for us today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I've been speaking with UO English major and slam poet Alex Dang. He is the co-founder of the UO English Poetry Slam team. He's also a 2-time competitor and now to be 3-time competitor at the National Poetry Slam, and was the Eugene Poetry Grand Slam champion in 2014 and 2015. His chapbook, You Can Do Better, was published in 2014. Thanks so much for watching.